maybe not with those words. Nobody sits a child down and says, "Speak less." It's subtler than that. It's a look across a dinner table. It's the way a room goes quiet after you say the true thing. It's a mother sighing, "Honey, not everybody needs to hear all that." It's a boss saying you're intense in a tone that isn't a compliment. And little by little, without ever deciding to, you learn to shave pieces off yourself before you opened your mouth. You call it being considerate. I want to tell you what it actually is. It's a river that was told it was flooding, when all along it was carving a canyon. I'm George. I've been walking with people in their faith for a long time now, and I've heard the same confession from more people than I can count. They lean in, they lower their voice, and they say some version of the same sentence. I think I'm too much for people. And every single time, I want to ask them the same question I'm going to ask you. Too much for who? Because that verdict didn't come down from heaven. God never once looked at you and said, "Tone it down." That sentence was handed to you by people who were uncomfortable with what your voice stirred up in them. And you accepted the sentence because you were young, or you were tired, or you wanted to be loved, and it seemed like a small price. It was not a small price. It was the largest one you've ever paid. So today I'm going to take that lie apart, piece by piece. Not with theory, with scripture, and with a few things I've watched happen in real rooms with real people. And when the lie is gone, what's underneath it is going to surprise you, because there are 7 things your voice does that most people around you cannot do. And you've spent years treating those 7 things as flaws. Let's start at the very beginning. Not your beginning. Before it, the first piece of the lie, that your voice was an accident. There's a young man in Scripture named Jeremiah. Before he ever preached a word, before he ever wept over a city, God said something to him that I want you to hear as if it were said over you, because in a very real sense, it was. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a voice. Stop on that. Not I gave you a message. A voice. The instrument itself was the assignment. And do you know what Jeremiah said back? He said, "I don't know how to speak. I'm only a child." Every called person I have ever met has said some version of that sentence. Mine was different words, but the same fear. Yours probably is too. I'm too much. I'm too intense. I say things people aren't ready for. I make rooms uncomfortable. Somebody else would be better at this. Now watch what God does. He doesn't argue. He doesn't give a pep talk. He doesn't say, "No, you're great." He reaches out and touches the boy's mouth, and he says, "I have put my words in your mouth." That's not encouragement. That's installation. Here is what I need you to understand about a river. A river doesn't decide to carve a canyon. It doesn't wake up one morning ambitious. It just does the one thing it was made to do. It moves, and the stone gets out of the way over time. The river is not being aggressive. The river is being a river. The stone experiences it as destruction. Heaven sees it as a road being made where there was no road. When people tell you you're too much, they are the stone describing the river. That doesn't make them evil. Stone doesn't know it's in the way. But it does mean their assessment of you was never a reliable measurement. Your voice wasn't an accident. It was formed, deliberately, before you had any say in it. Which means the first thing we're throwing out today is the idea that you can fix yourself by becoming quieter. The second piece, that silence, is humility. This one is more dangerous, because it wears a religious coat. Somewhere along the way, you started confusing shrinking with meekness. You started thinking that a holy person is a soft-spoken person. That godliness sounds like agreement, that the truly humble ones never disturb anything. Have you read the prophets lately? Jeremiah was so much that they threw him in a cistern to shut him up. They lowered him down into mud so he'd stop talking. And when they pulled him out, he opened his mouth again. Not because he enjoyed conflict, he hated it. He says so. He wished he'd never been born some days, but because there was a fire shut up in his bones, and he was worn out with holding it in. Read that again. He tried to be quiet. It made him sick. If you have ever swallowed a true thing to keep the peace, and then lain awake at 2 a.m, with your heart going like a drum, you know exactly what he's describing. That's not anxiety. That's a river being dammed. Humility is not smallness. Humility is knowing exactly what you are and exactly who gave it to you. A river that pretends to be a puddle isn't humble. It's disobedient. And it floods everything sideways. Because water that isn't allowed to go where it was aimed will go somewhere else, into your body, into your marriage, into a resentment you can't explain. I sat with a woman once in a hospital corridor at 3 a.m. Her father was down the hall, and it was close to the end. She'd been in that hallway for 11 days. And she told me the thing that was actually breaking her wasn't the dying. It was that she'd known for 2 years something was wrong with him. She'd said it out loud once. Her family had laughed at her for being dramatic, and she'd never said it again. She said, "I knew. And I made myself stop knowing because they were tired of me." That's what silence as humility costs. It doesn't cost you your reputation. It costs you your obedience. The third piece. That the discomfort in the room was your fault. Here's the piece almost nobody gets free from. So stay with me. You have walked out of conversations replaying every sentence. You've apologized for things that required no apology. You've sent the follow-up text, "Sorry if that was too much," when nothing was wrong, except that you were honest. You have been trained to read discomfort in a room as evidence of your own excess. But discomfort has more than one source. Sometimes a room is uncomfortable because someone was rude. And sometimes a room is uncomfortable because someone said a true thing, and now everybody has to decide what to do with it. Those two feel identical from the inside. That's the trap. Jeremiah made every room uncomfortable he ever entered. Kings, priests, his own neighbors in his own hometown, and not one time did God pull him aside and say, "Son, you've got to work on your delivery." The discomfort was not a malfunction. It was the message, doing its job. Now I'm not handing you a license to be careless. Some people use "I'm just being honest" as a weapon, and that's a different sickness entirely. But you're not that person. I know you're not, because that person has never once worried about being too much. The very fact that this question haunts you is the proof that you're safe to trust with your own voice. The river doesn't apologize to the stone. It also doesn't hate the stone. It just keeps going where it was sent. So what is actually in your voice? All right, the lie is coming apart. Let's talk about what's underneath it. I'm going to name 7 things your voice carries. And I want to be very clear about something before I start. These are not talents. They're not personality traits. You didn't develop them. They were deposited, the same way Jeremiah's was, before the world had any opinion about you. Most people around you don't have these. That's not arrogance, it's just true. And pretending otherwise is what got you into this. A hammer isn't better than a key. But if you spend your life apologizing for not being a hammer, doors stay locked that were assigned to you. 1. Your voice names what everyone feels, and no one has words for. You've done this 100 times. A group is stuck, circling something, everybody vaguely uneasy, and you say one sentence and the whole room exhales. Sometimes they thank you. Sometimes they resent you. but the fog lifts either way. That's not being blunt. Naming is a spiritual act. It's the very first thing God gave a human being to do, Adam, standing in the garden, putting words on creatures so they could be known. When you name a thing, you take away its power to operate in the dark. Families keep secrets alive by refusing to name them. Churches keep dysfunction alive by refusing to name it. And then someone like you walks in and says the plain word, and everything that was hiding has to come out into the light. You thought you were tactless. You were carrying the naming grace. 2. Your voice carries weight beyond its volume. Notice something. When you speak, people either lean in or they push back hard. Almost nobody is neutral about what you say. You've probably been hurt by that. You've watched other people say the exact same thing and get nothing but polite nods while you say it, and the temperature changes. That's not a delivery problem. Some voices carry weight. There is authority riding on the words, and authority always provokes a response, because authority requires a decision. Jeremiah spoke, and kings sent for him in secret at night. They hated what he said. They couldn't stop asking. That's weight. 3. Your voice reaches the person nobody else can reach. I've watched this happen so many times I've stopped being surprised. There's always one person in the room who has stopped listening. Everybody's tried. The gentle approach, the patient approach, the leave them alone approach. Nothing, and then you say something, often something you thought was too direct, something you regretted the second it left your mouth, and that's the one that lands. Because the ones who've built the highest walls don't respond to soft. They've had soft. Soft is what everyone gives them. What breaks through is someone unafraid enough to say the real thing. You are that person's assigned voice. You always were. 4. Your voice interrupts the momentum of a lie. Lies build speed in groups. Gossip picks up velocity. A false narrative gets repeated until it feels like fact. Families run on stories that were never true, passed down and reinforced until nobody remembers where they started. And then one person says, "Wait, that's not what happened." Everything stops. You have been the one who stops it, and you have paid for it. You were called the difficult one, the one who can't let things go, the one who ruins Thanksgiving. Let me offer you another word for that. Watchman. Somebody standing up on the wall when everybody else went to sleep, calling out what's coming across the field. They didn't love the watchman either, but the city stood. 5. Your voice creates permission. This one you almost never see, because it happens after you leave. You say the honest thing. The room goes stiff. You go home certain you ruined it, and 3 days later somebody texts you, "I've never told anyone this." 2 weeks later somebody at work says the thing they'd been sitting on for a year. A month later your sister finally tells the family what happened to her. You didn't fix any of them. You did something more important. You went first. And going first is what makes it survivable for everyone behind you. Every honest room in the world had somebody who spoke first and paid for it. 6. Your voice carries what you have not lived through yet. This is the strangest one, and it's the one that makes people call you intense without knowing why. You say things that are truer than your own experience. You give counsel about grief you haven't tasted. You warn people about a road you haven't walked, and afterward you feel like a fraud. Because who are you to say that? That's not fraud. That's the difference between opinion and deposit. Jeremiah was young. He hadn't lived any of it. He was carrying words that came from somewhere older than his own life. When words come through you that you didn't build, don't panic and don't take the credit. Just don't get in the way. 7. Your voice cuts a channel where there wasn't one. back to the river. The people around you have been living inside a landscape shaped by what everyone agrees on. Nobody chose that landscape. It just settled that way over generations. What's sayable, what's not, what we don't bring up, who we protect. And then a voice like yours comes through. And slowly, not all at once, a channel opens where there was solid rock. People start saying things out loud that were unsayable a year ago. Not because you argued them into it. Because water moves and stone eventually yields. You will almost never see this happening in real time. Rivers don't feel like they're carving anything. They just feel like they're running. But go back to a place you left 5 years ago and listen to how the people there talk now. You'll hear your channel. Let me stop the list for a moment, because I want to be honest with you about something. I spent years telling other people to speak, while I was carefully managing exactly how much of myself I let out. I had a version of me for the pulpit and a version for the parking lot afterward. I told myself it was wisdom. It was fear. And the thing that finally broke it wasn't a sermon or a conference. It was an old man in my congregation who took my hand after a service and said, "George, when are you going to tell us the truth?" He didn't mean I was lying. He meant he could tell there was more, and I was rationing it. If somebody has ever said something like that to you, if somebody has ever looked at you and said, "I feel like I'm only getting part of you," that person was doing you a mercy, and you probably didn't hear it that way at the time. If something in you has been recognizing itself for the last several minutes, I don't want you to walk away from this and let it fade by tomorrow afternoon. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived, things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. The 4th piece, that you must be healed before you speak. Now we come to the part of the lie that hides the deepest. Because it sounds responsible. I'll speak when I've got it together, when I've dealt with my own stuff, when I'm strong enough, when I stop being a mess. Jeremiah was never a mess-free man. He complained to God. He accused God of deceiving him. He cursed the day he was born. He is, by a wide margin, the most emotionally raw voice in the Old Testament, and he never stopped being the voice. God did not wait for him to stabilize. The reason this matters so much is that your wound is not a disqualification. It's usually the shape of the channel. The place where you were hurt is very often the exact place where you can reach people no one else can reach. I watched this in a woman in a church I served in years ago. She'd lost a child. For a long time, she couldn't say the child's name without breaking. She stayed in the back row for 2 years. And then one Tuesday evening, an empty sanctuary. A young couple sitting in the 3rd row who'd just lost a baby. Nobody knowing what to do, she walked up the aisle and sat down beside them and said one sentence. I won't repeat it, because it was theirs. But I watched that couple's faces, and I watched 20 years of well-meaning advice from other people become irrelevant in about 4 seconds. She wasn't healed. She was carrying a channel. Water moves through the broken place. That's not poetry. That's how the ground actually works. So if you've been waiting until you're together enough to open your mouth, you'll be waiting a long time, and the people assigned to you are waiting too. The 5th piece, that the people who rejected you were right. This is the last one, and it's the heaviest, so let's go slow. Somewhere in your history is a specific person, a specific room, a specific sentence, and that sentence is still operating in you. Maybe it was. Nobody wants to hear that. Maybe you always have to make it about something deep. Maybe it was a friend who pulled away, and you never got told why, but you had a guess. Maybe it was a parent's face, and you built a rule out of it. Rules made from wounds feel like wisdom. They feel like maturity. I've learned to read the room. I've learned when to keep it to myself. I want to ask you something gently. How's that going? Because in my experience, people who master that rule don't become peaceful. They become tired. Deeply, unexplainably tired. Tired in a way that sleep doesn't touch. Jeremiah's own hometown turned on him. The people who'd known him since he was small conspired against him. And in the middle of that, God says something that has always struck me. They will fight against you, but they will not overcome you, because I am with you. Notice what's not promised. There's no promise they'll stop. No promise you'll be understood. No promise of a comfortable life. The promise is, you won't be overcome. That's what you get. And when I was younger, I thought that was a thin deal. I don't anymore, because I've now watched enough lives to know that being understood was never the thing that made anybody free. Plenty of well-understood people are miserable. What makes you free is being unable to be stopped. The stone doesn't stop the river. It never has. It just makes the river take longer. Let me tell you about a man I knew. I'll call him Ray. Ray ran a small auto shop for 31 years. 2 bays, a coffee pot that had seen better decades, a radio that only got one station clearly. He was the kind of man who fixed your alternator and told you your marriage was in trouble in the same afternoon. And he was right about both. People didn't always like him. He knew it. His own brother stopped speaking to him for 9 years, over something Ray said at a funeral, a true thing, said out loud, at exactly the wrong moment by everybody's reckoning, but heavens. Ray told me once, wiping his hands on a rag, that he'd spent his 40s trying to become a different kind of man. Softer, easier to be around. He said he practiced it, rehearsed conversations in the truck before he went into them. And he said those were the emptiest years of his life, not the loudest years, not the years with the most conflict, the emptiest. When he died, that little shop couldn't hold the people who came. And what I heard over and over, standing in that gravel lot, was some version of the same sentence. Ray told me the truth when nobody else would. His brother came, stood at the back, cried harder than anyone. 9 years of silence, and the thing that finally broke it was the memory of a man who wouldn't shrink. I think about Ray whenever somebody tells me they're too much, because the people who loved him didn't love him despite the thing he apologized for his whole life. They loved him because of it. They just never found the words to tell him, while he could still hear it. Don't wait for the gravel lot. Some of the people who need your voice are going to spend years figuring out how to say thank you, and some of them never will, and neither one changes what you were made to do. What to do with this tomorrow, I don't want to leave you with a feeling. Feelings burn off by Thursday. So let me be practical, in the way a pastor is practical. First, stop apologizing preemptively. You know the phrases. Sorry, this might be too much. Sorry, I know I'm intense. You put those on the front of true sentences like a disclaimer. Take them off. Just say the thing. Let it stand. Second, notice what happens in your body when you swallow something true. There's a specific feeling, a tightening, a heat, A heaviness that arrives about 10 seconds after you decide not to say it. Learn that feeling. That's your own spirit telling you a river got dammed. You don't have to fix it right then. Just stop calling it nothing. Third, find the one person this week. Not a crusade. 1. There's someone in your life right now who needs a sentence only you will say. You already know their name. You've known it the whole time you've been listening to me. Say it to them. And fourth, this is the one that matters most. Stop asking whether you're too much, and start asking whether you're being obedient. Those are completely different questions, and only one of them has an answer. Because here's the thing about the boy at the beginning. God touched his mouth and said, "I have put my words in your mouth." And from that moment, the question of whether Jeremiah was too much was permanently settled not by Jeremiah, and not by anybody who heard him. It was settled by whose words they were. They were never yours to shrink. Before you go, I want you to do something for me. And I want you to be specific. Think of the one time you said the true thing anyway. The time you spoke when your hands were shaking and you were sure you'd ruined it. Maybe it was to a parent. Maybe in a car in a driveway with the engine still running. Maybe at a graveside. Maybe on a phone call you almost didn't make. Tell me what you said. And tell me what happened after, even if what happened was silence, even if it cost you something. Write it in the comments. Not for me. For the person scrolling past it at midnight, who is holding the exact same sentence in their mouth right now, terrified, deciding, you're going to be the reason they say it. That's the whole thing, you know. That's how the channel gets cut. Not by floods, by one voice, then another, running the same way until the rock gives. The water was never too much. The rock was just used to being in the way.